The Secret Experiment. The evening sky over Cedar Ridge, New Jersey, was tinged with deep orange and purple hues as the sun sank behind the dense pine forests. The small, quiet town was unremarkable in most ways. Narrow streets lined with aging houses, a single diner where locals gathered to gossip, and the looming silhouette of the old military testing site on its outskirts. For decades, the facility had been abandoned, its purpose long forgotten by everyone except those who indulged in rumors and conspiracy theories. It was an unspoken truth among the residents that strange things occasionally happened near the testing grounds. Lights, sounds, and even the occasional report of an unexplainable figure seen moving among the trees had given rise to all manner of wild stories. The military, of course, dismissed such claims as nonsense, but the secrecy surrounding the site only added fuel to the fire. On a humid summer night, Cedar Ridge was anything but quiet. The first reports came from a group of teenagers returning from a late-night drive. They had stopped on a secluded road near the testing grounds when they noticed a brilliant green light pulsating from within the forest. One of them recorded it on their phone, the shaky footage showing a vivid glow that seemed to throb in time with a low, otherworldly hum. By the time they reached town, the news had spread like wildfire. Nathan Collier, a 32-year-old astrophysicist who had returned to Cedar Ridge to care for his late grandfather's home, initially dismissed the commotion as exaggerated hysteria. Nathan had grown up hearing stories about the testing site, tales of experimental aircraft, secret weapons, and even alien technology. He had always been skeptical, choosing to trust in science over superstition. But as the glow intensified, visible even from his porch, his curiosity began to outweigh his doubt. Grabbing his flashlight, a camera, and his notebook, Nathan decided to investigate. He drove toward the edge of town, where the testing site's dilapidated chain-link fence stood as a feeble barrier to keep out trespassers. The glow was brighter now, pulsating rhythmically, and the hum had grown louder. It was an unsettling sound, low and resonant, like the hum of a tuning fork pressed against his skull. As Nathan parked his car on the side of the road and approached the fence, he couldn't shake the feeling of being watched. The air seemed to crackle with static electricity, raising the fine hairs on his arms. He adjusted the strap of his camera around his neck and squeezed through a gap in the fence, his breath hitching as he stepped onto the overgrown grounds of the testing site. The glow originated from a large, circular structure at the center of the facility. Nathan froze in awe. The object looked like a giant satellite dish, but its surface wasn't solid. It shimmered and rippled like liquid metal, reflecting the eerie green light that bathed the surrounding area. The air around it wavered, distorting the landscape like a heat mirage. Nathan crouched behind a rusted vehicle, snapping photos and jotting notes in his notebook. His mind raced with questions. Was this some kind of advanced technology? A weather experiment? Or something far more bizarre? His thoughts were interrupted by movement near the edge of the glowing light. A shadow flitted across his vision, quick and graceful. He held his breath and focused his camera on the movement. At first, it was difficult to make out details, but as the figure stepped closer to the edge of the light, Nathan's heart nearly stopped. It was humanoid in shape, but impossibly tall, with elongated limbs and a narrow head. Its skin, or what passed for it, seemed to ripple and glow faintly, as if it were made of the same material as the structure. Nathan's camera clicked furiously as he captured frame after frame of the figure. He was terrified, but his scientific instincts overrode his fear. The figure turned its head toward him, its glowing eyes locking onto his with unsettling precision. Nathan felt a jolt of adrenaline, his instincts screaming at him to run. Before he could move, another figure emerged from the light, and then another. They moved in unison, their motions fluid and unnaturally smooth. Nathan clamped a hand over his mouth to stifle a gasp, his mind racing with a mixture of terror and awe. These weren't human. They couldn't be. Suddenly, the hum shifted, growing louder and deeper. The figures turned their attention back toward the glowing structure, as if responding to an unspoken command. Nathan took the opportunity to retreat, inching backward as quietly as he could. His foot caught on a piece of rusted metal, and the resulting clatter shattered the fragile silence. The figures whipped around, their glowing eyes fixed on him. Nathan's body froze, every muscle locked in terror. One of the beings tilted its head, studying him like a predator, sizing up its prey. The hum intensified again, vibrating through his chest and making it hard to breathe. Summoning every ounce of courage, Nathan turned and bolted toward the fence. His camera banged against his chest as he sprinted, the glow of the structure illuminating the path ahead. Behind him, he heard a strange, guttural sound, like a distorted mechanical growl. He didn't dare look back. The gap in the fence came into view, and he dove through it, scraping his arm on the jagged metal but not stopping until he reached his car. Slamming the door shut, he fumbled with the keys and started the engine. The glow in his rearview mirror faded as he sped down the road, his heart pounding in his ears. He didn't stop until he reached his driveway, where he sat in silence, clutching the steering wheel and trying to make sense of what he had just witnessed. Nathan knew one thing for certain. This wasn't just a freak light show or a military experiment. Whatever he had seen out there was beyond anything science could explain, and deep down, he feared the disturbance was only the beginning. The morning after his harrowing experience at the testing site, Nathan Collier awoke to sunlight streaming through his bedroom window. For a moment, he thought it might have all been a vivid nightmare. But the camera slung over the back of his chair told him otherwise. Its memory card filled with images he was too afraid to review. He poured himself a cup of coffee and sat at the kitchen table, his mind replaying the events of the previous night. The glowing structure, the humanoid figures, the hum that had resonated through his very bones. It had all been real. He couldn't shake the feeling that he had stumbled upon something extraordinary, something that wasn't meant to be seen. Unable to resist any longer, Nathan grabbed the camera and connected it to his laptop. His hands trembled as he clicked through the images. Most were blurred, distorted by the strange vibrations in the air, but a handful were clear enough to show the shimmering structure in sharp detail. One frame captured the figures emerging from the light, their elongated forms unmistakable. Their glowing eyes seemed to pierce the screen, sending a chill down Nathan's spine. Before he could dwell on the implications, his phone buzzed. It was a text message from an unknown number. "We need to talk. 3 p.m. at Miller's Diner. Come alone." Nathan's pulse quickened. The timing was too precise to be a coincidence. Was someone else aware of what he had seen? He considered ignoring the message, but curiosity won out. He couldn't pass up the chance to get answers. At exactly 3 p.m., Nathan walked into Miller's Diner. The place was mostly empty, save for a man sitting in a corner booth. He was middle-aged with a military haircut and an intense gaze that seemed to scan the room like a radar. Nathan approached cautiously. "You're Nathan," the man said, motioning for him to sit. It wasn't a question. Nathan sat down, his heart pounding. "Who are you?" The man leaned forward, his voice low. "My name is Colonel James Monroe. I used to oversee operations at the testing site before it was officially shut down. Let's just say I know what you saw last night." Nathan's mouth went dry. "Then you know what that thing is? The glowing structure? The creatures?" Monroe nodded grimly. "It's not just a structure. It's a gateway, a doorway to somewhere else. And those creatures you saw, they're not from here." Nathan stared at him, struggling to process the revelation. "A gateway? You're telling me it's some kind of portal?" Monroe sighed, running a hand over his face. "The site was part of a classified project back in the 1970s. We were experimenting with advanced energy sources, trying to tap into zero-point energy to power the next generation of military technology. But we didn't fully understand what we were dealing with. During one of the tests, we accidentally opened the gateway. What you saw last night is the result." Nathan's mind raced. "And you just left it there? Didn't anyone try to shut it down?" "Of course we tried," Monroe said, his voice tinged with frustration. "We poured every resource we had into containing it. We even succeeded for a while, but the energy field is unstable. Over time, the containment protocols failed. That's why the site was abandoned, officially anyway." Nathan frowned. "Officially?" Monroe glanced around, lowering his voice further. "There's still a team monitoring it. They've been trying to stabilize the gateway remotely, but something's changed recently. The activity you saw last night, it's new, and it's escalating. Nathan leaned back, his thoughts a whirlwind. Why are you telling me this? I'm just a scientist. What am I supposed to do about it? Monroe fixed him with a steely gaze. Because you're one of the few people who's seen it up close and lived to tell the tale. We need someone who can analyze what's happening in real time, someone who isn't bound by bureaucratic red tape. The team can't get close without risking exposure, but you can. Nathan felt a surge of anger. You want me to walk back into that death trap after what I saw? Monroe didn't flinch. You want answers, don't you? The gateway is destabilizing, and if we don't act fast, it could expand beyond the site. Think about what that would mean for Cedar Ridge, for the entire region. Nathan stared at the table, his fists clenched. He had spent his entire career chasing the unknown, searching for truths hidden in the universe. And now, when faced with the greatest mystery of his life, fear threatened to paralyze him. After a long silence, he nodded. Fine, but I'm going to need equipment and help. That evening, Nathan found himself back at the edge of the testing site, this time accompanied by Monroe and a small team of technicians. They carried portable energy scanners, radiation suits, and a device Monroe called an energy disruptor. The hum was louder than ever, vibrating the air like a living thing. The shimmering structure seemed brighter, its light pulsating with a frantic rhythm. Nathan's gut told him that whatever was happening, it was reaching a critical point. As the team set up their equipment, Nathan examined the readings on a handheld scanner. The energy field was spiking wildly, its frequencies shifting in ways that defied logic. The gateway was unstable, its edges flickering as though trying to expand. Monroe handed Nathan a headset. We'll monitor you from here. If anything goes wrong, use the disruptor. Nathan swallowed hard, his heart pounding as he stepped closer to the gateway. The air around it was freezing, and every instinct in his body screamed at him to turn back. But he kept moving, his eyes fixed on the swirling light. When he reached the edge, the ground trembled beneath his feet. A shadow moved within the glow, and then another. The creatures were coming through again. Monroe, Nathan said into the headset, his voice tight with fear. They're here. Nathan stood frozen as the first figure stepped through the gateway. The creature moved with unsettling grace, its elongated limbs and shimmering, translucent form casting distorted shadows in the eerie green light. Behind it, more figures emerged, each slightly different in size and shape, but all sharing the same unearthly presence. The air around them crackled, and the hum from the gateway intensified, resonating deep within Nathan's chest. Stay calm, Monroe's voice crackled through the headset. We're monitoring the readings. They're off the charts. Nathan took a shaky breath, gripping the disruptor tightly. The handheld device was sleek and angular, with a glowing core that pulsed in sync with the gateway's hum. According to Monroe, the disruptor was their best shot at destabilizing the gateway and closing it for good. But the device hadn't been tested under field conditions, and Nathan had no idea what would happen when he activated it. The lead creature turned its head toward him, its glowing eyes locking onto his. Nathan's grip tightened as the creature took a step forward, its movements fluid but unnervingly deliberate. The temperature plummeted, and Nathan's breath became visible in the icy air. The ground beneath the creature's feet blackened, the vegetation withering to ash as it passed. Monroe, Nathan whispered, his voice trembling. They're advancing. Hold your position, Monroe replied. We need a clear shot at the energy readings before you deploy the disruptor. Nathan wanted to scream at him for ordering patience in the face of such a terrifying presence, but he held his ground. The creatures didn't rush him. Instead, they spread out, their movements precise and calculated. One of them raised a clawed hand, and the air shimmered as a ripple of energy radiated outward. The hum of the gateway surged, and Nathan's scanner beeped frantically. They're feeding it, Nathan said, realization dawning on him. The creatures, they're stabilizing the gateway, Monroe cursed under his breath. If they keep doing that, the gateway will expand exponentially. You need to act now. Nathan's heart pounded as he adjusted his grip on the disruptor. The lead creature took another step toward him, its gaze unrelenting. His instincts screamed at him to flee, but he knew there was no running from this. He flipped the switch on the disruptor, and the device hummed to life, emitting a high-pitched whine that pierced through the low resonance of the gateway. The creatures reacted immediately. They recoiled, their movements jerky and disoriented, as if the disruptor's frequency disrupted their connection to the gateway. The lead creature let out a guttural, mechanical screech that sent shivers down Nathan's spine. It lunged toward him, its clawed hand outstretched. Nathan ducked and rolled to the side, narrowly avoiding the creature's swipe. He pointed the disruptor at the gateway and pressed the trigger. A beam of concentrated energy shot from the device, striking the shimmering structure at its center. The gateway shuddered violently, its edges flickering and distorting. The creatures screamed in unison, their forms flickering like dying flames. Nathan's scanner beeped erratically as the energy reading spiked, and he realized the disruptor was working, but not fast enough. The gateway was fighting back, its light intensifying as it resisted the disruption. "Monroe, the disruptor isn't strong enough," Nathan shouted. "We need more power." "We're routing additional energy to your position," Monroe replied. "Hold your ground." The ground trembled beneath Nathan's feet as the disruptor's beam grew brighter. The creatures began to dissolve, their forms breaking apart into streams of light that were drawn back into the gateway. But the process was slow, and the gateway continued to pulse with dangerous energy. Nathan gritted his teeth and took a step closer, the icy air cutting into his skin. He pointed the disruptor directly at the heart of the gateway and pressed the trigger again, pouring everything he had into the device. The beam struck the gateway with a blinding flash, and for a moment, everything went silent. Then, with a deafening roar, the gateway collapsed. Its edges imploded inward, the light condensing into a single brilliant point before vanishing entirely. The hum ceased, and the air fell still. The creatures were gone, their presence erased along with the gateway. Nathan collapsed to his knees, the disruptor falling from his hands. His chest heaved as he tried to catch his breath, his mind reeling from what he had just witnessed. The testing grounds were eerily quiet, the only sound the distant chirping of crickets returning to the night. Monroe and his team rushed to Nathan's side, their faces a mix of relief and awe. "You did it," Monroe said, helping him to his feet. "The gateway's gone." Nathan shook his head, his legs trembling. "It's not over," he said, his voice hoarse. "If the gateway was opened once, it can be opened again." Monroe nodded solemnly. "We'll make sure this site is secured. No one will ever come near it again." But as Nathan looked around at the scorched earth and the lingering shadows where the creatures had stood, he couldn't shake the feeling that their presence had left a mark, a scar on reality that could never truly heal. In the weeks that followed, Cedar Ridge returned to a semblance of normalcy. The glowing lights and eerie hum were gone, replaced by the quiet rhythms of small-town life. But for Nathan, the memory of that night remained vivid. He couldn't forget the creatures, the way they had moved, the way they had looked at him as if he were the intruder. Late one night, as he sat on his porch staring at the stars, his phone buzzed. It was a message from an unknown number. The gateway was only the beginning. Nathan's blood ran cold. He looked to the horizon, half expecting to see the green glow return. The night was silent, but the message was clear. Whatever had come through the gateway wasn't finished. Not yet.